This is Pastor Neal from Zion Lutheran Church in Hopkins, Minnesota. And today is Tuesday, August 18th, 2020. And we're here to spend a little time thinking about some of God's gifts to us of life and forgiveness in Jesus, and to just contemplate a little bit about His love for us. Now, this morning what I want to do is I came across a while back a parody, a story. It's kind of taking the story of Adam and Eve and how they interact with God. And it's written by Sly Jones. And he's a playwright, a journalist, a communications consultant. And I thought it was quite funny. But boy, I think he hit it on the head too as well. So I want to read this to you. It's entitled, "About That Apple I Ate Back in the Garden." Memorandum to the man upstairs from Adam regarding the unfortunate incident. Adam writes, "Please allow me to offer my most sincere apologies for the incident involving the apple and the woman Eve. As you could probably tell during the interrogation in the garden, I did not have my wits about me, and all this talk about a serpent who spoke really shook me up. But after spending a week or so, has it been that long already, amid the thorns and thistles trying to plant my own garden, I've decided that it really is time we had this out. I want to be straight with you and say up front that I consider it my right to live in the Garden of Eden. That's why you created me, and being deprived of its beauty and subtlety has left me with great emotional damage. You might call it emotional whiplash. Yes, that's what I'd call it. You may as well know that an attorney called on me the other day and told me that I have certain rights in this incident. Oh, I forgot his name, but he seems to know you quite well. He said that I could sue for damages and be assured of at least some kind of compensation in a jury trial of my peers. However, this is a bit complicated by the fact that I have no peers. Naturally, that's your fault. So, I'm writing you personally in hopes that we can come to some sort of private settlement in lieu of a trial. I'm certain that once you understand the circumstances surrounding this unfortunate incident, you will agree that I should be exonerated. First, the woman Eve, whom you gave me as a wife, was obviously defective in some way. Did I understand you to say she was fashioned out of one of my ribs? Now, I know very little about such things, but if she came from one of my ribs, did you make arrangements for a brain? Perhaps you just haven't told me how it's done. Exactly. But it strikes me that something went wrong in the early stages of product development. After all, she claims that serpent talked her into eating the apple. And we both know that serpents don't talk. Minor birds, yes, but serpents, Second, and I don't mean to be an upstart here, but shouldn't freedom be, as it were, free? That is to say, how can I be a free creature if I'm not allowed to eat from a certain tree? This may be more than semantics. I'm afraid, because I have it on good authority from my attorney, that I should have been allowed to eat from any tree I liked. I'm sure your answer will be to that, why? The truth is, I'm not sure exactly. It has to do with this vague notion regarding the linkage between freedom and responsibility. I don't like it. It's like being a little bit pregnant, isn't it? I mean, one can't be truly free if one has to consider the consequences for one's actions, can one? I also take umbrage at your use of the word sin. Isn't that a bit judgmental on your part? How can I even listen to what you have to say when you insist on putting me down for my actions? It makes me feel like a bad person. And when I feel bad, I'm going to act out. It's only human. So when you say I've sinned, it makes me feel worthless, and I'm apt to do whatever I want. I just thought you should know. Furthermore, consider my personal circumstances. I was born without a mother. And although you've been very nice to me, you've also been a bit, well, distant. So it stands to reason that I am psychologically impaired when it comes to forming relationships of any kind, because I've been unable to bond with anyone who could nurture me. The woman Eve, she insists on being called a woman, even in casual conversations, as you probably have noticed. She doesn't really understand all this. She thinks you created me in order to serve her. She spends most of her time criticizing me for the names I gave the animals. Hippopotamus doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, she says. Also, there's a little matter of my schooling. We both know that's been incomplete. I haven't been prepared properly to deal with these kind of complications. A rebellious wife, talking serpents, decisions about what to eat. You may remember how long it took me to understand the principles of the water canopy. Well, this is much harder than that. Then there's the ecological argument. I went back to that tree of knowledge of good and evil, as you call it, and what did I find? Fruit rotting on the garden floor. Heaven only knows that it's our job to harvest the fruit before it attracts vermin. This is precisely what Eve was doing, husbanding the garden, protecting it for generations to come. Should we be penalized for that? More to the point, should I be? To sum up then, this has been a major misunderstanding that is not at all my fault. There, I've said it. And since you are the one who introduced me to Eve and practically threw us together, the real accountability in this situation belongs to you. I haste to add that this is not simply my opinion, but also reflects the thinking of my attorney, who will be in touch with you shortly to work out the details of an amiable settlement. Should we not hear from you, we will assume you would rather see this matter settled in court. Or perhaps we could let it be settled in the court of public opinion. Yes, that's a good idea. Why don't we see how people feel about these issues a few thousand years down the road? I'd wager a week's worth of bananas that most people will come down on my side of this argument. They'd rather be totally free. They'd prefer to have some say in who is their mate for life. Finally, I understand the meaning of your term, wedlock. And they'd enjoy eating from all the trees of the garden without it being labeled a sin. Furthermore, I'm sure the concept of freedom with responsibility is badly flawed and will be rejected by future generations. If I'm wrong, everything should go pretty smoothly through the ages. If I'm right, well, let's just say I won't want to be around to collect on my bet. There you have it, friends. Isn't that a great story? I love it. Sly puts an interesting spin on how we deal with our lives today, doesn't he? And I think he's captured a lot of the sentiment on our concept of responsibility and what sin is, and our accountability not only to one another, but to God himself. But as we all know, I hope anyway, thankfully God is a gracious and forgiving God. That's why Jesus is so important in our lives. Through Jesus, we are forgiven of our selfishness and sin. My friends, as we go about our day, may God help us to have good attitudes and willing hearts to follow the directives of God for our lives. Because when we follow his ways, we win. Hey, thanks for listening. Looking forward to our next visit.